All right,
Maybe.
y'all, what's up? I think we're live. Chris got a new computer, so he is messing with his background at this time. Let's see. I've got to, y'all know the drill. I got to post this link everywhere, so everybody just hang tight with me for a second. Um, sorry, I don't think we did. Did we do one last week, Chris? I don't think we ended up doing one.
I don't think we did. No.
Um, I don't know, man. Everything just runs together at this point, but I'm pretty sure we did not do one last week. So I appreciate y'all bearing with us. And we got, I mean, honestly, plenty of stuff to talk about. We did do individual. Obviously, we're going to maybe talk a little bit about recruiting and some of the guys South Carolina's landed this month, 3 commitments in July. But we did actually already talk about several of those guys in our individual videos and actually went into pretty good depth on those guys. So if you haven't seen those, hit our just normal videos. Go to our Gamecock Central YouTube and hit our normal videos there, and you can actually check out our thoughts on on the 3 most recent commitments there for South Carolina, and watch some highlights on them. I'll still try to maybe hit a couple of highlights today, but yeah. So Chris, what's up, man? Obviously, lots going on.
Yeah.
All right, I think I got my links going like they're supposed to be. If and by the way, if you're watching this directly on YouTube, that's probably the best way to post your questions. I'll try it. If you're watching on the Insider Forum, I will try to watch and see if anybody has questions on there. But the best way for us to get it quickly is just to go straight to our YouTube and put it in the little chat. And obviously, if you're watching embedded on an actual story, you're going to have to click through to YouTube Live and leave your question there. But we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Again, glad that you guys are joining us again. Sorry we missed last week. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. And yeah, plenty to talk about. I think we have to start, Chris, before we get into many, I guess, specifics with South Carolina and going back over recruiting. And we've got some upcoming announcements to talk about. We have to start with sort of this domino effect that we've had. I would say started by the Big Ten. Some people maybe wondered, all right, are the Ivy Leagues canceling football for the fall? Is that the domino effect for the rest of football? Obviously, I don't think that's the case. The rest of football, FBS, still going to try to play, but more and more just seems obvious that this season is not going to look like what a regular college football season looks like. And, Chris, for a minute there, I think when the numbers were really starting, the case numbers were starting to go down, everything was opening back up, there was maybe a time window where things were looking really good. And now numbers have gone up again. People are concerned again, obviously. And, I think the writing is on the wall as we cross under that 2-month threshold to the start of college football, that I think everybody wants to play, but it just may look a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's been really fascinating to watch how all this has evolved sort of as the COVID-19, numbers or research or, public opinion of it, as all that is sort of shaped over, the last several months since February, March. And, at one point we were at a point at the outset where we weren't sure what in the heck was going to happen. To some degree, we're still really not. I mean, you look at the Big Ten statement, and they sort of just said, hey, if we play football, we're going to move to this type of schedule. So they're even still leaving it open. But really in the past few weeks, as case numbers, soared, regardless of whether or not, what people think about what that should mean, the reality is that did start putting doubt in some people's minds who actually make the decisions at the college football level, and we don't need to argue back and forth as to whether or not that's the right call, whatever it may be. That's just the reality, is that they started saying, that this may not be as much of a lock as we thought, because, Wes, maybe a month or so ago, however long it might have been, it very much looked like we're heading towards a season, and we're heading towards a season that's going to be regular in terms of the schedule. Right now, the fans, we knew that all that would be different, and the question was just sort of how many fans can you get in there. Now it is very much moved in the last several weeks to, hey, let's take some more steps to alter this thing, and this is what they've settled on in terms of, going to a conference only schedule. And like you said, domino effect. I mean, obviously the Big Ten has chosen to do this. How many, will they expand the amount of games they're playing because the college football playoff comes into doubt, all these different things? Will they move? They already play, I think, 9. So will they move to 10? That's a question. The ACC, it's already been reported, is likely moving to a conference only schedule. So it is going to create, for a variety of reasons, whether other conferences feel like they need to follow that for perception or for, medical reasons, whatever it may be. You've got that, but you've also got the fact that, when you play a schedule, if all the other conferences are dropping out and playing conference only, that sort of leaves you there, right? You think about South Carolina, they play a Sun Belt team, they play a Conference USA team, they play an FCS team, they play an ACC team out of conference. So if all of those teams say, hey, we're playing within our conference, there you are, so then that domino effect, and then maybe you just expand your own schedule within your own conference.
Yeah, man, I think the fact of the matter is, you're sort of, even if you're not connected, like you're saying, even if your conference is not connected to these other conferences and these other conferences, each conference can make its own decision. Then, like you said, you're going to be directly affected by if you're the SEC, you're South Carolina, and you have one of those conferences on your schedule, you're being affected by that. I've seen the sentiment out there of, okay, just for example, how is it okay for South Carolina to play, a team across the country potentially, but can't play Clemson right down the road? I would say, first of all, I think from what we've heard, specifically, mainly you, the sort of people saying South Carolina Clemson is definitely not happening, I believe, are jumping the gun a little bit at this point, in that I think both sides would like to make it happen if possible. Is it possible? Who knows? We'll see. But point being, as you sort of go through this thing, I think the reason for going conference only is that you have complete control of all the protocols within your member organization. So if there is an outbreak and you need to shift the schedule around, it's much easier to do that within your own conference. 2, I think if you want to have a very strict protocol for how we're going to go back to things, I mean, the NCAA, when they put out a statement yesterday basically saying, hey, guys, we support you.
You're doing a good job.
Like, what?
Good luck with that.
There's no college football top. There's no leader sort of at the very top of college football saying everybody has to follow these same protocols. So if you're a conference, you don't know, you need to have oversight of the entire group of teams so that you can say, hey, we're going to test everybody on Friday before the game. We're going to test everybody Monday after. Whatever your protocol is, you have control over it. Then I think it gets very, very murky if something happens and a game has to get canceled or postponed and you're going across conferences and maybe that game just doesn't get made up. And if you're looking at something within the conference, maybe there's a little bit more flexibility. For one, if you're playing like 10 games or something, let's say the idea that's thrown out there, conference only, but going up to 10 games. You're playing 10 games in 13 weeks, maybe 14 weeks if you count sort of the weekend that is normally conference championships, and then the time after that if you're getting ready for bowl games. You have a little bit more flexibility to say, hey, we're going to play those 10 games in like a 14-week span, maybe potentially, and there's flexibility to potentially move them around. So I think that's more the thought process as opposed to, hey, how come, Texas A&M can fly from Texas to Columbia, South Carolina to play football, but South Carolina can't hit the interstate for a few hours and go to Clemson. It's not really about the distance. It's more about having control.
Yeah. And that very question, I think you nailed it there. That very question came up this morning on the Insiders Forum. We got a report that breaks down, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, plus some more, with just the sort of the ins and outs of what's going on and what it could mean. And that was one of the questions is, how is South Carolina going to A&M, and all that. And I think you hit the two main points. The ones that I've heard are that, and I'm not sure why this is, but like you said, maybe if there was maybe one protocol, I guess they're trying to let the conferences have some independence with how they handle different things. But if there was one protocol, maybe you'd feel okay about being able to, have conferences continue to intermingle on sort of the national level. But like one person put to me in the SEC last night, we don't know at the SEC level what these other schools are doing within their own conference, with testing, for example. Now, it seems like you'd be able to just find out, just call them and find out, but maybe there's no way to verify it. Maybe it's different from what you're doing and you're not comfortable with that. There's a variety of factors there. So like it or not, that's just sort of how it is. Different conferences have different, protocols, and some of those protocols, my understanding, are going to be changing in August. I think you'll see even more testing than has been done, more rapid testing, et cetera, as the season gets closer. And secondly, that flexibility that you mentioned, especially within the conference. Obviously, the conference is going to be the bulk of any team slate, whether it's 8 games in the SEC, whether it's 9 in the Big Ten, et cetera. Even if they expand that out to say, let's play 10 games, or if there was some scenario where you say we're going to add an extra conference game, we'll let you play a +1. You can find an opponent. I don't know if that'll happen, but it has been kicked around. It does give you that flexibility. Say South Carolina is going to play, I don't know, Georgia, and they shift around the conference schedule. Let's say it's week 2, and Georgia has 30 players test positive, and they can't make the trip. Maybe you move that around and you shift another team in. And then, like you said, you've got some extra weeks. Now, maybe you could do that if the schedule was full too, with out of conference teams. But this, cutting down on the amount of games in theory gives you, I guess if they went 10 game schedule, conference only gives you a couple extra weeks. And then it gives you maybe a little bit more flexibility within your conference to move those games around, because you got to get these conference games in to give it some semblance of normalcy. And the other thing is the college football playoff. It'd be very difficult to have the college football playoff without a conference slate, a good one, and B, without an adequate number of games. And 8 games may not be enough to accomplish that, which is why there's so much talk about keeping it in conference and expanding that number.
Is there any chance that this offhand leads to an 8-team playoff for this year at all? I've seen that thrown around on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if let's say it's just an 8-game season, conference only. There's not much separation, there's multiple teams potentially undefeated.
Yeah.
8, if you said, hey, we're going to cut the regular season down to 8 games conference, but then the Power Fives, all your conference champions, make it, and then 3 at-larges, or 2, one group of 5 and 2 at-larges. That, and some people say, well, that's counterproductive. Why are you expanding the playoff? Well, you're only expanding the number of games for the teams that make the playoff. It's actually allowing you to crown a champion, to let the kids have a season, while also maybe eliminating some of the risk and giving you that flexibility that you have. Is that a Twitter dream, or do you think that's a real thing?
Well, the other thing is, and maybe by that time there's more clarity, maybe there's like a nationwide sort of protocol. But the other thing is, now you're in any sort of playoff, now you're mingling conferences, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a 10 game, maybe it's a 9 game conference schedule with a +1. And so maybe at that point, schools have mingled with one other opponent from out of their conference. I don't know. There's so much I don't know at this point. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it, this would be the year to do it. Whether it's an 8-game or 10-game schedule, I'm inclined to think, and this really is just a guess at this point, I'm inclined to think that they'll probably try to book 10 games. Couple reasons. Number one, more flexibility. Like if one has to get canceled, if you just can't, there's too many outbreaks and people have to shut it down. Gives you more flexibility, gives you a cushion. You can move more opponents around. Secondly, and I might have had 3 points. I think I said 2 things, but another one is, it just helps you assess the playoff. Obviously, the more games you have, the more opportunities for someone to lose, or the more opportunities for someone to keep winning. You win 10 games versus if you're 10-0 versus 8-0, you have a better resume at that point. And I think I forgot my other point, but I'll think of it in a minute. But I think this would be the year to do it, if you decide to go that route. But a lot of people just feel like a magic, I guess you could say like the magic number is going to be 10, to get to that point.
Yeah, still way more questions than answers, unfortunately, but we'll see, man. I mean, I think there's so much that goes into all this, and I think everybody, for the most part, wants to play. It's just about finding a way to make it all work. And I mean, dude, I remember looking at those graphs where they had the projected new case totals, and way back when all this started, at the beginning of the summer and then into the middle of the summer, all those curves looked like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine by the time fall gets here. We're going to get football back. NBA, Major League Baseball will be back. Everything's fine. And now you just look at the numbers, and they don't look anything like what those projections said, 3 or 4 months ago. So I think it's still a lot of questions. We'll see. I mean, I think South Carolina, the SEC, are pushing forward. All you can do right now, if you're on the ground, like if you're a team, all you can do right now is just prepare like you're kicking off with Coastal Carolina on September, was it 5th? September 5th. They're back in person with coaches, meeting with players starting next week. They've been all Zoom. Workouts obviously spread out among the 4 groups, then meet with your assistant coaches over Zoom. Next week, they get their kids back, so to speak. Coaches are able to actually meet with them. I know from what I've heard within the program, most of the people are just excited to actually be able to be in the same room with their players, because everybody misses that part of this, that aspect of it. But what it looks like moving forward, man, just still, I think way more questions than answers right now. Speaking of questions, let's hit, I guess we got one of them on here. If you're, all right, we got a few people watching. So if y'all have questions, just throw them in the chat and we will hit them. Let's see, Rob, what's up, man? Appreciate the compliment there. Yeah, the individual videos we do, I'm a fan of them. I hope that y'all are as well. They tend to get good numbers, and they let us sort of give a little bit more in-depth thoughts on the players that South Carolina's recruiting, or in this case, landing, than we do in the live videos. Craig is a loyal watcher here on our YouTube, so appreciate you joining us again, Craig. And Craig has a question, Chris. I think that, I mean, this to your point, Craig, is going to be the strangest season of college football in our lifetimes. His question: what happens if an OC tests positive on Thursday before a game? And I think that question can be posed with multiple scenarios under the word OC. What happens if the head coach tests positive the Thursday of a game? What happens if 2 of your quarterbacks, your starter and backup, have spent time around each other and they test positive? At this point, frankly, I don't want to say the on-field results don't matter because you play to win, blah, 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 blah. But dude, if a team is missing guys or missing a coach and they lose a game because of it, it just kind of is what it is, right? Like, I think the big thing right now from a player perspective is that they get to play. They get to do what they love to do. They get to do what they came to college to do. And from a school perspective, let's say it for what it is. They're doing it to fund the athletic department so that their athletic department exists in the future.
Well,
Go ahead.
My question is not, sorry to cut you off. So not only like the on-field result, but I think one part of that question is literally, do you play the game? Right? Because now Thursday, okay. Well, even Thursday, because to back up, one thing I've asked people along this is when are they going to test the players and staff, right? Because you're going to test everybody as close as possible before the game. So when is that going to be? Is it going to be before you get on the bus for the trip, morning, night, or the plane, whatever? Is it going to be at the hotel Saturday morning? I've been told probably like the day or night before. Now, when is that? Okay, if you do it, let's pretend that you do it before they leave for the trip. If it's a road game, for example, let's say South Carolina is going to LSU and one person tests positive, coach, player, equipment person who's making the trip, whatever it may be. Well, what do you do? Like literally, do you just do you test everybody and you just are okay with it? Because like, how long does it take to show that you're active or whatever? Do you have to cancel the game because there's one positive test? Because normally your protocol is if someone tests positive, you isolate that person, and sometimes you isolate everybody else. We've seen the instances of that. Do you back off that a little bit? Do you just say, okay, whoever tests negative, you're out. Whoever tests positive, you're on? Is there some threshold to where you're allowed like to make your own determination as to whether or not the game needs to be rescheduled, forfeited, whatever? Like, for example, let's say South Carolina has 15 guys that test positive and like 8 are starters. Can Will Muschamp say, guys, we can't play this game, we got 8 guys out? Or does the SEC set some threshold? If you have 10 or more players test positive, we're going to postpone the game. You know what I mean? We didn't even answer the question. I just created like 100 more questions. But like, these are the things I'm just not sure of beyond just missing guys for the game. If you're starting quarterbacks out, whatever. Yeah. But like, what about just literally being able to make the trip? Like, what kind of protocols are they going to establish? And I just don't know if we know the answer to that yet.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, the key is those protocols, they need to come up with every possible scenario they can possibly come up with.
Yeah.
And then come up with the protocol before. You can't be deciding that type of stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
And there needs to be oversight. There needs to, and it needs to be taken out of the hands of the coaches as well. I think it needs to be probably on your medical staff, and there probably needs to be a guy at the SEC level that signs off on each team before the game saying, this team meets our protocol, this team meets our protocol, go play. Because if you leave it up to the school, I'm not saying a school would do it, but if you leave it up to a school, there's always the chance of, oh, we're good, we're fine. And maybe you're not. And to your point, if 10 guys test positive, they've been in contact with the entire rest of the team. If 10 guys test positive, are 20 more going to test positive in 5 days?
Right. That's what I don't know. I mean, scientifically, I have no idea. And maybe some people show it later on a test. I don't know.
And they're going one-on-one, tackling each other and guarding each other in practice all week. So,
yeah. But, I mean, that's a tough one to answer, and then, does the SEC set some threshold? Because obviously the point is to try to get the games in, because the more you have to move games around, the more untenable this thing gets. And this has been a concern of people for quite a while. Even when we were barreling towards a full season, I had a lot of people tell me, man, I don't know, like somebody's going to have an outbreak. This is when numbers are lower. way lower. They're like, somebody's going to have an outbreak and we're going to have to cancel games or whatever it may be. And it sort of has gone that direction. And even with this model, it seems like we're probably going to have to cancel some games or postpone them. Maybe not. I hope not. But is the SEC going to say, how many guys can you travel to an away game? 70, right? 70 guys.
I think it's 70 for
They're going to say, as long as 60 of your guys are positive, we don't care who they are, play the game. You know, like, are they going to have to say that? Because the other aspect, I just remember the point to tie into the playoff about a 10-game schedule, and it might apply here. I've been told that TV is going to want conferences to play as many games as possible. The obvious reason is TV makes money off these games. So everybody's going to want to play as many games as possible. The players want to because they like playing. The coaches, the fans want as many games because they want to watch the games. TV wants it to make money, etc. So at some point, it seems like the conferences, just talking through this, they might have to say, that might be one solution. They might have to say, if you have this many guys that are good to go, come on and play the game. And like you said, take it out of the hands of the coaches. Even if you've got 10 guys out and they're all starters, if it's your entire starting defense -1, too bad. Bring your backups and play. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what'll happen, but it's just a thought.
Well, do you have to, if you're a coach, do you have to base your entire practice plan and season around number one priority being as few people get it as possible? And I mean, do you do less one-on-ones? Do you do more walkthrough type stuff and just realize, hey, there's going to be some sloppy moments in games, but this is where we are. I mean, I don't know, but I would think that at least plays into the conversation. How do you structure your practice, and how do you structure? And we had a good comment there from Bobby Melnick. Are you going to allow an OC to call a game not on site? Can you put in different rules where, as long as they have communication, is that going to be allowed if somebody tests positive? Especially if they're asymptomatic and they feel fine, but they're a positive test, is it just you fill in the next guy, or can the OC still, cell phone in basically? Who knows, man? And I think the teams that are the most, I would say, from a logistics standpoint, that they have sort of looked ahead and thought of all the potential scenarios and planned for them, are going to be the ones that are probably going to be in the best shape. You're going to have a plan. Okay, you basically are going to have a backup OC. If my OC or DC isn't there, who's calling plays? If our first two quarterbacks can't play, what's the game plan for the third quarterback? You're going to have all these contingencies from a game standpoint that, play into the game. But again, to me, man, it sounds crazy in any other time. I don't even know if the results matter this year, man. It's really just about getting through the season from a healthy standpoint, and from a standpoint of just that the games happen, that sports can sort of live on without us having to completely restructure everything about an athletic department, which, if there is no college football season, I think that's what you're looking at. So in some ways, you're talking about programs disappearing, programs having to restart, just a complete mess. So wins and losses are way down the line, I think, of things that are important for this year. Let's see. Andy Hawkins want to know if we talked about this a little bit earlier, Andy. Any idea if the conferences will go to, let's see, cut off here. Yeah. Will only be 9 games, or will they fill out to 12 with West opponents? Yeah, that's something we don't know yet. There's been a lot of talk about 10 games, like Chris said, sort of being that threshold you're trying to get to. Does that mean you play 10 conference games? Do you do a 9+1? I think, Clemson and South Carolina would love to play each other. That game's been going on. What did we say? 1909.
Yep.
So, just from a traditional standpoint, you want for that game to take place if possible. But hey, if the ACC says, I mean, how strong is this? We're only playing conference games thing going to be? Is it as the ACC, we're only sort of going to be involved with 10 games and you're welcome to go out of that if you want, but that's all you, or what's the actual protocol of a conference only slate? Is it basically that the conference is only going to be involved in the conference games, but you're still free to go do other things if you see fit? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like you're only playing your conference games. It seems that way. And that's it, like, period. If you're a member of our conference, you're only doing this. But I don't know. I mean, we dig into bylaws and all sorts of stuff, I guess. And real, this has never happened before. So I don't know if anybody knows the answer, to that. There's no precedent, for this type of thing. So my guess would be that you can't really go outside, or maybe you got to get some special permission or whatever it may be. Or if maybe there's like, protocols that are more universal, I guess you could say, that are in place, but all that's just speculation. I think right now we need to just assume until proven otherwise, that that a conference only model is the most likely for Power 5 conferences. That's really what it seems like. Now, could that shift? Could another conference, say the SEC, because there seems like they're waiting a little bit longer. I think they're going in that direction, but they're waiting a little bit longer. Could they make a push to say, hey, we want to try to get in a +1, or we want to add a conference game and play another one, make a +1? Maybe, but whether or not that's feasible, it's difficult to tell right now.
Yeah, and man, it just seems like for the longest time you heard the words, we have time. We have time to wait. We have time to see. We have time to wait. And now it just feels like that time is starting to tick away. That is, the deadline for making a decision, I would say, is very soon. We've seen reports that the SEC is going to meet next week. What do we say, Monday? Have you seen that? The SEC, all the ADs are meeting on Monday. I think we start to get a better feel at that point of really what we're looking at, and we'll see what all the different ADs sort of have as their feedback on all that. So anyway, like I said, if y'all want to throw questions in the chat, go ahead. We can keep talking about COVID, but also want to talk a little bit of South Carolina football recruiting and what's just happened for the start of July, plus what's coming up with more decisions on deck. 3 commitments already in July. 3 more 3-stars obviously is something that we see on our boards a lot. People talking about 3-star this, 3-star that. Chris, I'm gonna throw you on the spot, but I'm gonna give my answer first. So far, among the South Carolina commitments in this class, I believe they're at 14 at this point.
That's right.
Who's the most underrated commitment to South Carolina's class based on Rivals ranking? Who do you like the most among the guys that are committed? And I think there are several, obviously, potential guys you could name. I really like TJ Sanders, and I think his upside is probably up there with anybody in this class. But as far as just the player and who they are right now compared to their ranking, which is a 5.5 3-star, my guy is Simeon Price. The athleticism, the numbers are off the charts, from the opening camp when the kid was like 15 years old or something. Just absolutely off the charts. Could play receiver, could play DB, tough-nosed, has just that confidence about him. Not necessarily cocky, but definitely has a confident demeanor to him. He's my guy. Who's yours?
That's a really good pick. So he would be in the top 3 for me. And if you didn't pick him, I probably would have picked him. Another one I like a good bit on tape is John Darius Morgan. I think he's just a big mover at guard. I would have to go TJ Sanders. I really would, just because I think and he's a 5'6" 3-star, and is he the best, like out of the best player right now in the class? No, but I just look at what he could become, the potential there. And I think he's already a good player, but when you got a guy that's 6'4" and 285 and can move like he can, who's still, just got a year of football under his belt, I think that's hard to find in some cases. And so I think that the potential there is really big. And some of, when we think in terms of star rankings, I think really you're sort of assessing potential, right? Because everybody's going to have a bit of a learning curve, some more than others when they get to college based on position or experience, whatever it may be. And, for me, I look at his potential, in 4 years, 5 years, am I going to be surprised if TJ Sanders is a draftable player? No, not at all. Just based on what we've seen with the size, the athleticism, the potential. And so, when I look at that, that's why I think he's probably worthy of being bumped up. And, as well, if high school football is regular in South Carolina, we'll have a chance to sort of assess how he's progressed this season. But when he's football only, and training football only, I think he's got a chance to be really good.
Just to be clear, you didn't say TJ Sanders will definitely be a first-round draft pick, right?
I didn't say that. No, okay. I did not. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that.
No, I don't know if you probably didn't see this on our Facebook last week. Somebody responded to one of my videos and said that Gamecock Central has no credibility because we say that every kid they land is going to be a first-round draft pick.
Oh, wow.
And, I responded that if he could find one instance anywhere on the internet of us saying that about anybody in the class, that I give him a free year, no questions asked. So I wanted to say that I would give him a lifetime subscription, but I was like, what if we really said that at some point and I just don't remember it?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to get myself in trouble with the boss man, because I don't even know I don't think a lifetime subscription exists. But yeah, so I mean, guys, here's the thing, and we're going to tie it into this next question from Randy. How accurate do you think the star ratings are this year compared to the other years? I mean, dude, I think, and obviously we're tied in with rivals.com, and rankings and stars are a huge part of our business and what we do. But the 2021 class rankings are, to me, at best, incomplete. And frankly, at worst, I would say completely worthless. Like, I know that's harsh, but generally the recruiting class is ranked in cycles, and you have your original guys, which right now the rankings are still based off of, what they did in camps last year as underclassmen and what they did as juniors on the field this past year. And at the early parts of a ranking system, from a timeline standpoint, your 4 and 5 star guys are, in many times, your can't miss, just crazy athletes, way more athletic than anybody else on the field, obvious, talent guys. And in some cases, your early bloomers who are just ahead of everybody else they're playing against. And as time goes on, other people sort of catch up to them a little bit. How many times has and I won't even say South Carolina, how many times does an SEC school find a guy in the spring of their rising senior year, and then they absolutely blow up and end up being a 4-star or high 5 or a high 4-star or 5-star guy by the time the process is over? It happens all the time. You're missing, I would say at this point, 3 major evaluation periods of the process would be first are your, what I would say, company camps. And that's rivals.com. That's the opening, your Under Armours, all your different camps that are put on by companies early in the spring, sometimes even you would say late winter, the early part of the year, you have all those going on. That's one opportunity. College coaches, for the most part, cannot go to those, but I promise you they get information from those. Next, you have spring practice. And obviously, the Rivals camps, all that was taken away this year. Next, you have spring practice. Spring practice is an opportunity for the Rivals 24/7, all the different recruiting guys to go watch the kids and have a look. How much has this guy improved since last season? Well, the college coaches, the assistants, can go to spring practices, and they can actually take 2 trips per school to go by and see a kid either in the weight room or in an actual practice setting. So that's 2 opportunities where the evaluation process has been taken away. Then you go into the summer. The entire month of June is camp season for the actual schools. A huge part of our coverage on GamecockCentral.com is that Chris and I are at every single camp that South Carolina puts on. Gamecock Central has had at least one of us at every single camp that Will Muschamp has put on since he arrived at South Carolina in 2015. Well, how many times do we get to write about somebody that's landed an offer from South Carolina at those camps? Well, you take that away now as well. And the recruiting industry, the analysts, everybody else involved, they can go to the camps in some places. South Carolina, you can. Georgia, I think you can't. But you're telling me the analysts aren't watching which guys get offers and what their numbers are at these camps and how they perform at these camps? Information spreads. So that's now 3 different parts of the recruiting cycle that your guys have had completely taken away. So I'm not saying every 3-star guy South Carolina has is a 4-star or 5-star. I'm saying we have no idea which 3-star guys would have blown up to be 4 stars or 5 stars and which guys should be 3 stars. And we don't know which 4 stars and 5 stars would have fallen back down and been sort of, I would say, not exposed, but maybe it's shown. Maybe we were a little maybe we were a little too over the top on this early ranking just because the guy was an early bloomer. So I don't know. I think in general, stars as a whole, if you get more 4 and 5-star guys than the other teams, chances are you're going to have talent on your team. But for 2021, this class, this cycle right now, I don't know if they mean anything, man.
Yeah, and I agree. Look, I mean, if you even in this cycle that's so weird, if you're landing, if you land 10 top 100 guys in your class, even in this cycle where it's been much more difficult, probably going to have a really good class. Probably, odds are. And if you do that 2 or 3 years in a row, probably going to be really good. I think the lines blur a little bit more when you're talking about a low 4-star who's outside of the Rivals 250 versus a guy who's like a 5-6, which is a mid-range on the Rivals rating scale, 3-star. Because maybe that guy moves to a 5-7 after camp, and that's really close to a 4-star. Maybe the 4-star slips down to a 5-7 after camp or whatever. And so it's in those instances where it gets a little tougher, or a guy like Nick Barrett, who's from Eastern North Carolina. I don't think anybody's ever seen him in camp. Got him on tape. That's about it, Omega Blake. I don't know if anybody's seen him in camp lately. Would have been several opportunities to do so this spring and summer. I haven't gotten that, and hey, maybe he'd gone to the camp and everybody would have looked at it if anybody saw him and said he's ranked exactly right. We think maybe, but maybe he can move down. But it's just been more difficult to tell. And I'm with you. Look, I will never argue with anybody that says I wish South Carolina could land 10 top 100 players in a class. I don't care about the 3-star argument about how guys need to move up and down and the lack of camps, blah, blah, blah. Just give me 10 top 100 guys no matter what. I would ride with you on that. I believe there's validity to that. But number one, we didn't expect South Carolina's class to be that this year anyway, as we've outlined. And secondly, there is, when you get outside of that type of range, the rest of your class is still really important. Even the elite football teams the past several years, when you look at Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, name a bunch of playoff teams. Yeah, they've recruited some big time talents and some 5-star guys have had great quarterback play, et cetera. But they've also had some guys that sometimes nobody else really wanted, or they were a 3-star, or they were a 2-star, and they're out there making plays for those teams. So those guys do count in your class. And so that's why Wes and I, I think consistently talk about the fact that, that range of players, the bottom half of your class or whatever it may be, you still need to hit on those guys, whether it's just having depth or whether it's having some of those guys be way better than their ranking was. And so this cycle has been really, really challenging for everyone, whether it's coaches or media people or those who do rankings, to sort of assess where certain guys are at from a development standpoint.
Well, and like you just said, man, anybody who's listened to anything that we've said this offseason, you knew this wasn't going to be that difference-making class. I think the last cycle, the one that just got on campus, the freshmen right now, there are some true on-paper difference makers in that bunch. Obviously, Marshawn Lloyd, Jordan Burch, Luke Doty, guys like that. But we knew that the writing was on the wall already, that it was going to take a lot for South Carolina to have a great class this year, because it's a perfect storm, really, of negative things as far as affecting South Carolina. The state of South Carolina itself down in this recruiting cycle as far as having true difference makers. Now, there are some guys that have emerged, but is there that true the fact that there's not even really a true guy that everybody can agree is a 4-star in the state of South Carolina? That says a lot. That generally does not happen. There's usually at least a couple of guys at the top that are sort of no-brainer type prospects. So you throw in the disappointing season last year, 4 wins, the fact that schools can just negative recruit the heck out of your staff right now and talk about, is the staff going to be there or not, which is happening. It does happen, and I promise you it's happening right now. I've heard specific examples of it happening with guys from schools that South Carolina goes head-to-head with quite a bit. So you have all those things. We knew this wasn't going to be an on-paper superstar-studded class. Then throw in the fact that everything we're talking about with the rankings really just being incomplete right now. I think for South Carolina, you sort of just have to weather the storm, man. Hope that you've evaluated well, develop the guys in this class, and then hope you can kind of pair that difference-making 2020 class with a difference-making 2022 class and, win some games on the field this year. And then long-term, it's really not a big deal. And we'll find out what happens with this current class in 2 or 3 years. Will we look back and say, man, that's the best evaluated class they've had? Well, I mean, what if this class has no difference makers, but has 14 guys that just contribute positively to the team and, are starters, play well, help on special teams? Not every class is going to be just filled with your your all SEC type players. The big thing for South Carolina, I think, is just that this class, once it actually plays out 2 or 3 years, that it doesn't just completely bust out. If you have a class that has a ton of busts, then it just destroys your depth, I think. And I think that destroys your special teams. And for so long, we used to talk about how bad South Carolina special teams were. It didn't matter who the special teams coordinator was. They're always bad. Remember before this maybe recent run where they've been solid, I would say, on special teams. I think your depth and even when Steve Spurrier was here and they were getting these elite top part of the class guys, you looked at the bottom of these classes, there were so many busts that I think it really affected the depth a lot.
It did. And you can go back and look at some of those classes that contributed to those really good Steve Spurrier teams. And a lot of them had, a bunch of 4-star guys, but really some of the best players in those groups were guys who were ranked as 3-star or lower guys. I mean, you look back at even when, when the program was sort of building. I mean, you look like at the 2008 group, for example. I mean, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it had 6 4-stars, but one of them was Jarrell King, who was solid. Eric Baker didn't do much. Antonio Allen was really good. That was his prep school year. Akeem Auguste out of prep school as a starter. CC Whitlock and Chaz Sutton. All those guys are really solid. But then you look at, Shaq Wilson was on that team. TJ Johnson was on that team. Kenny Miles, wasn't an elite player, but he certainly helped South Carolina win some games. Devin Taylor, Tory Gurley, so some guys that contributed, especially Devin Taylor. And you look at 09 and 010, and there were some guys who were high level, like Connor Shaw and Dylan Thompson in 2010, for example. And you had some stud types like Marcus Lattimore, but you also had some guys lesser down. So I don't think this class will be high on that like stud factor. I think this will be a lesser rated class. A lot of people ask us, will it be top 25? I don't even know. I don't know if it'll get there. I mean, if it is, I think it'll be close, honestly. But because normally you can count on South Carolina being in the top 20, top 25. Like that's just historically where they've been, other programs like Missouri, for instance, historically was like, they were like in the 30s, and sometimes they were really, really good, so it just depends. And I think this class will probably end up falling, could very well end up falling outside that top 25 range. But the key is just how good are the actual evaluations? How good are the players when they actually hit the field? I don't think it'll be as good of a class as it was last year. It's not going to have 2 5-stars. It may not end up being as good either on paper or actually on the field. But the key is, can you get some guys who are good enough to help you win games out of that group?
Yep. All right. So let's talk about some of these upcoming announcements. I guess we can sort of just roll through them because, frankly, these next 3 guys, I don't expect much good news for the Gamecocks. But this weekend, you've got Sunday is Greg Penn III, the 4-star linebacker that's from DeMatha. That's, of course, Marshawn Lloyd's school. You've got George Wilson, who is a defensive end, outside linebacker type, would be a buck in South Carolina's scheme. He's announcing on Sunday as well. Then you have Damon Harmon, who is the cornerback from Virginia. They'll be announcing August 1st. Those are sort of the newest guys who have said when they're going to announce. Chris, I know my opinion, I think you're on the same page, is that South Carolina probably not in great shape to land any of those 3 right now as we sit on Friday. Would you agree with that?
Yep, agree. I'm with you on that.
So we don't have to go all through that. But I do know, as we've seen, when announcement times sort of get close, sometimes, Keon Coleman was a lock to Oklahoma until he wasn't. So sometimes these things change at the last minute. Is there anybody on that list that you think is worth paying attention to more than the other 2 as possibly being a surprise get for South Carolina? Or do you think the fans need to just sort of just kind of accept, I guess would be the word, that
tune out? Yeah, I can't really pick one. I will say that I think South Carolina was final 2 with Wilson and final 2 with Penn, I think, probably. Or final 2 or 3 with Penn, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, I don't think they were, they were in the public top 5 for Harmon, but I think probably not the runner up there. But I just wouldn't expect, I mean, like you said, hey, maybe we get a call tomorrow or call somebody tomorrow and figure out that, something's changed. But right now, it just doesn't seem to be going that way.
Yeah, and that's happened before. Mo Kaba, Marshawn Lloyd himself. Yeah. It'd be pretty interesting if Penn went the same route as Lloyd and just completely surprised everybody with his pick. But it doesn't seem like those 3. But on a positive note for Carolina fans, the guy that we're sort of tracking right now, a little bit down the road, but Malachi Bennett, someone that South Carolina has, I think, been in pretty good shape with for a while now, has started to narrow in on a decision. He said this is not a set date, but August 28th is their scheduled first game of his senior year, and he is thinking about making his decision then. So, he'll be a guy to continue to keep an eye on. I think, Jordan Poole will be a guy, even though there's not a specific date. We've seen him obviously have a date, push it back. I think he's a guy to keep watching as far as a potential commitment soon. Is Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, is he someone to maybe keep watching for? You never know. You never know there. I think Ontario Brown, the running back from Georgia, don't have anything definitive on a date, but I think is one to just keep an eye on, to pay attention to. And I think those are the guys maybe that are more in the line of tracking it if you're a Carolina fan, and that you feel, I'm not saying they're going to necessarily get all those guys, but I think that they have a real shot, with all those guys. So, Randy, Malachi Bennett was a wide receiver. Sort of a true, you talked about this, I think, Chris, in your best bets thing on Gamecock Central. You have some guys that are possibly receivers, possibly defensive backs in this class, whereas Malachi is more of your true, I think, sort of lengthy, tall wide receiver, can go get the football, really good hands, down the field threat. And I actually like him. I like his film a lot, and I think he'd be a good fit for South Carolina.
Yeah, it would be a good get. They do have a lot of guys tagged as sort of athletes in this class, but they've got sort of a number I think they want to hit at receiver, but they've got also some guys who could play multiple positions. When you think about Omega Blake, could maybe start out a wide receiver, but he could certainly play defensive back. Some of those athletes, like a Derwin Burgess, for example, are almost definitely receivers for South Carolina, but there are some with enough versatility to, maybe move him around. But Bennett's one of those true, like you said, receivers, and they've liked him for a while. Alabama's been a state they've hit harder, this cycle for a lot of reasons, and someone that I think they've done really good work with, Joe Cox and Will Muschamp and all those guys on the offensive staff, and seem to like him a lot, and there's a lot of mutual interest there.
Yeah, so those are the guys to keep an eye on, I think, moving forward. But there's some guys we're forgetting, or some guys that could pop up and go ahead and announce. That's always a possibility in recruiting, especially, here's the thing, hopefully we're going to have high school football. A lot of times kids want to get a decision out of the way before their senior year. So do you have that maybe in the next month and a half? Do you have sort of that final push for kids, assuming they're going to get to play football, to go ahead and sort of get it out of the way and make a decision? Maybe so. There is something to be said, as much as we've talked about kids kind of, almost being forced to take a spot and to get a reservation. There is something to be said for you. If you have an offer, there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. There's something to be said for just accepting that offer and picking a school, even if it's not ideal. So we'll see. All right, we got another question here, Chris. This is from Twin Rivers. I don't think I've seen that name pop up on our chat before, so appreciate you joining us. If you're new, appreciate you asking a question. I'll let you take this one, Chris. Have you heard anything about Tennessee commit being a true flip candidate? Or have you heard anything about South Carolina being a true flip candidate for Jordan Mosley, the Tennessee commitment wide receiver out of Alabama? I think they're in it. I think, first of all, that kid's a really good football player. If you're South Carolina, you'd love to have him. Chris, what do you think the chances are of an actual flip there?
Well, and that's a good question. We actually had a bit on the Insiders Forum with Jordan Mosley in an insider report the other day, and he mentioned that South Carolina, Tennessee, obviously the school he's committed to, and Penn State, plus UCF, were schools that were still communicating with him. And so he still seems open, in terms of communicating with those guys. I know obviously South Carolina would love to get him on campus. And for me, Wes, I think that's probably the biggest part of the equation. Can you get him on campus? Like literally, is it going to happen at some point? We really don't know. We don't know if in-person visits are going to be allowed during the season. That's been rumored a little bit. I've even started hearing it from prospects lately. Whether or not that's actually true, we don't know. So will he end up taking some visits? If so, was South Carolina's situation at the time. But I do know that there's been pretty steady communication there, and I think South Carolina is at least in that conversation right now.
All right. Hey, good stuff as always, guys. We thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button. If you are not a GamecockCentral.com subscriber, please come check us out. If you have any questions about the site, you can shoot me an email. I'm Wes at Gamecock Central. Chris, yours is Clark at Gamecock Central.
That's right.
You can email Chris, hit us on Twitter, whatever, man. We'd love to get you on there. We think if you hop on that you'll like it and join our community, man. That's really what it's all about, is a little Gamecock community on there. Yeah, we have articles and information, but I think it's about having a community of people to talk with as well. Final question, Chris. Your background there, do you know what game that is?
I don't. Might have to either move or pull up the picture.
Okay.
Let me actually, I can find out for you because, or I don't know if I can find out actually, because one of our esteemed photographers took this photo and I pulled it off of our photos on our Flickr page where we host a lot of our stuff. But
yeah, it doesn't really matter. I was curious. And hey, thank you, Twin. Thank you, Randy. Thank you to everybody that's joined us on here. We're going to try, I know we missed last week, but for the most part, we're going to do these every single week. Do you have an answer?
I have an answer, and I almost had, probably people are going to tell me to remove the background next time. It's actually from last year's App State game. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
My point being, if you look behind Chris, that is a near, if you look at the corners, there's a couple of empty spots there, but a near capacity crowd at Williams-Brice Stadium for a night game. And I'm going to tie all this together, I promise. Have you been watching soccer?
Yeah, I've watched some soccer lately. Not as much as I'd like to, but some.
Okay. So how weird is it going to be to watch an SEC football game with just 50, if that's like 80,000 people right there in that picture, 15,000 people in the stands for an SEC football game? Super weird. And now that you've been watching some soccer, how do you feel about, and I'm talking about in general, not necessarily college football, because MLB is now having their discussions about piping in crowd noise. Mm-hmm. The soccer games you've watched, has there been piped in noise?
Yeah, some of them. Yep.
Some of them not?
Some of them not, yeah.
What's better?
Oh, piped in noise, way better. Yeah, because soccer is the type of thing where like the pageantry is part of it when you hear, because a lot of times, I mean, this is people's complaint about soccer. It's just, it's dudes kicking a ball around for a while, passing it or whatever it may be, playing.
Glad to hear you admit that.
But when, still awesome. But when you hear it, you hear like the chants and the stuff. I mean, they pipe it. It's not just like the static noise they pipe in. Even it sounds like a soccer game, and I think they even make it louder. Like when people score goals and stuff, they do like so. That's way better. Because at first I wasn't sure if I'd have an opinion on that. And then I heard it with none, and I was like, oh, we need crowd noise up in here. Baseball, it doesn't matter to me. Baseball, I feel like is a lot of times it's quiet. Like if you're just in the fourth inning and you're just chilling, whatever.
Yeah, it is quiet, man, but there's that just low.
It gets louder. Yeah.
There's that low hum.
There's the hum
of people talking.
Yeah.
To me, Major League Baseball needs to pipe that in. Then they need to lean all in on the miking up players.
Yeah.
As well. And then, but when there's a home run, I think you do need to, because I was watching the Braves are streaming their scrimmage on Facebook, and all you had, like the only thing you can hear, and obviously with the actual game, you're going to be able to hear, the ball hitting the bat and stuff like that. But on the stream, it was from a distance, and all you could hear was the PA announcer announcing the player, and then dead silence. And I was just like, man, I was like excited for a second to watch, and I was like, this is boring. So I'm hoping there is some crowd noise piped in. College football, I will say, if you got the right 15,000 people in there, you can actually still generate some in-person noise.
Yeah.
Stadium.
Yeah.
The Arkansas game where Michael Scarnecchia drove South Carolina down for the win, and the Storm just played, the Storm was crazy, and a lot of people left the game. It's one of the loudest games in the last few years with a small amount of people because the people there were so into the game.
Yeah.
So you can have big crowds or big noise from small crowds, but I'll be very curious to see if the SEC, what do they do? Dude, I think you got to maybe look at some opportunities to put some graphics on the empty portions of the stadium for advertising, or some in-person, if you have to hang up banners or something for anything you can do to maybe, recoup some of what you're going to lose when it comes. Now, do the companies have the money to spend on advertising they would have or not? I don't know, but surely there's some companies out there that are still doing well that haven't been as affected that would love to have a graphic of their business plastered onto Williams-Brice Stadium for the entire football game that shows up on national television.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering maybe there's some more opportunities to make back some money that's going to be lost in this thing by being creative about what we pipe in, both from a audio standpoint, but mainly what we put, with visual graphics and stuff like that. I think Major League Baseball is probably going to do a bit of that. It would be stupid not to, I think, because you have an entire empty stadium worth of potential graphic space,
Yeah. Good points. And, it will be interesting to see what they do fan wise and just, how all that's structured, and what people do with the noise. But certainly that's a huge part of college football, or really most sports, the pageantry, the fan, sort of interaction and all that. And a lot of that's going to be missing this year. It's going to be everything, most everything about it's going to be different except for, I guess, the game itself. That's going to be about the only thing that's exactly the same.
Yeah, unless they go to 7-on-7 or something.
Yeah, right.
Insane at this point. All right, guys, we appreciate it. We're over an hour. That's sort of where we cap it. But yeah, Wesley Hodge, appreciate you joining us. Randy, appreciate you. Twin, appreciate you. Craig, as always. Bobby, Rob, appreciate all you guys. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.